Well, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of The Stew on this podcast. And in today's episode, I'm super excited to introduce to you to somebody who I recently just met not too long ago. And from the moment that I got connected with this guy, he became my new best friend right away. And so this guy who I'm about to introduce you to, we were both speaking at a conference in Nashville back in October. And the guy who put on the conference, I just asked him during a little network dinner, out of all the people that are here at this networking dinner, who is one person that I have to get to know while I'm here for this conference? And so this guy introduced me right to our guest today, Mark MacDonald. So I would love to introduce all of you to my new friend, Mark MacDonald. Mark, how you doing, man?
I'm doing really good. And I mean, you are just far too kind. I mean, when you came over to talk to me, our conversation was probably the highlight of that entire conference.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you and I ended up sitting there talking for a good hour, 2 hours, and we kind of ran the gamut on a whole bunch of different stuff. And then comes the conference time, and you and I are hanging out. And as we're both leaving Nashville, we ended up being in the same terminal and talked a little bit before you had to fly back off to Florida, and I went back to Wisconsin. And so it was just really cool. Like, there are just those moments, like there was those people that God causes you to cross paths with that you have no idea how much it's going to impact your life in that moment. And I'm so glad that our paths crossed for sure.
But the big concern here is that every person who has just tuned in to this podcast is thinking, okay, I don't have 2 or 3 hours. So we put like time constraints on our conversation. Like, will it even work?
Yeah, for sure. So, speaking of time constraints, let's do this thing. I want you to tell everybody who's listening, who is Mark MacDonald? What do you do?
Wow. Well, Mark MacDonald, you'll probably hear an out and about in house, and that either means I'm from Minnesota or I'm from Canada, and the second would be the right one. I am Canadian, but I'm now an American citizen for almost 2 years, which is very exciting for us. And I live in Jacksonville, Florida. We came from Canada to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, set up an agency there. In Canada, I was senior creative director for one of Eastern Canada's largest ad agencies. And we had close to 60 people. And the entire time I worked in the secular world, I just kept thinking, so why doesn't the church know this? And I know that there's a lot of people who talk about the difference between secular and sacred, and I believe that we're all called to the sacred. And whether you're doing a secular job or not, I think that we all have to be thinking, so how can this improve the church, or how does this help the kingdom? And my wife and I, we prayed about that and had the opportunity to come to North Carolina, set up the agency there, and started working with churches, started working with several of the large church associations, and got a great opportunity to be able to stand on stages and talk to pastors and churches. And I just every day I can't believe I get to do what I get to do. I write a bunch of articles. People might have read some of my articles. I think I'm just past the 830 published magazine articles right now. Man. And then through that, publisher asked me to write my book, Be Known for Something. And it became an Amazon bestseller. And it's just a church leadership book of, so what is your church really known for? And that's the agency is called beknownforsomething.com. And from that, had the opportunity to come to Jacksonville, Florida, and work with the 3,000 Baptist churches here in Florida. And again, pinch me. I can't believe I get to do what I get to do.
Yeah. So, and I think that was one of the things that I took away from our initial conversation with each other was what you do for a living. Like you just said, pinch you're dreaming. To me, that like if I wasn't doing full-time ministry work in the church environment, if I didn't feel called to be, a pastor, of a church or anything like that, what you do, I told you back in Nashville, that's exactly what I would love to do. Like this idea of, I used to tell people, like, have you ever seen the show Bar Rescue? Or like this guy comes in and rescues the bars that are just starting to fail and all that kind of stuff. Like that's how I felt. Like that's what I feel like you do for churches. Is like, okay, maybe there's a mission drift going on someplace, or maybe we're not keeping up with the times. So let's bring in this guy to help us get back on focus, back on task, and all that. So as I was just listening to you talk, I was like, man, Mark is doing what I would love to do. That's almost a dream come true.
Well, and it's interesting because, I mean, you just said all the buzzwords that just like get my, my heart starts swelling up, because focus, like the church has oftentimes lost its focus. And I'm talking about Big C Universal Church, lost its focus. And Jesus just continuously talked to his disciples, and in his earthly ministry was just constantly saying, but remember, here's what your task is to do. And I think that the universal church has got to figure out what is their focus. And then when you get to the local church, little C church, I mean, it's just so easy to lose your focus because you're chasing things all the time. And I think that's why I enjoyed our conversation, because this whole idea of VR world and all the different things is like, is this just another thing that we're chasing? And I mean, we can get into more of that, just because I think that everybody quickly has to make a decision whether they're going to go to church or they're not going to go to church. And if they decide that they want to go to church, then they have huge amount of decisions that they have to make in order for them to choose a particular church. And if it's a church that's out of focus or doesn't feel like it's in the arena of something that would interest them, then they just move on now. It's just so quick. There's so much noise. There's so many opportunities, so many choices that are out there. So we really want to help churches. Our agency works with all denominations, all different sized churches. I love pastors. I think that's why, I love talking to you. I love just hearing a different approach to ministry. I don't tell people how to do ministry. I just tell people, I know what works when it comes to the focus and making sure that you're focused on the right things.
Yeah. So one of those things that you and I talked about, which was probably the most awe-inspiring statement that you made for me, like you dropped a lot of golden nugget information that week that we were in Nashville. But in our initial conversation, one of the things I heard you say is you get hired on by a church to come be a consultant for them. And you show up to a hotel and you ask one of many questions, I'm sure, while you're there. But one of those questions is there a good church around here? I'm probably going to be here for the weekend. What should I consider? And your insight on that most of the time was what was inspiring to me to even bring back to where I'm at now. But so give the listener a rundown what that usually looks like and why it's important for the churches to shift focus in that direction.
Well, and just to, bring everybody who's listening up to speed, I guess that, I do mystery visits. I go in and I act like a pure guest from your community and attend church for the very first time. Oftentimes I'm flying in. The church has booked me at these hotels. Oftentimes the church's name will be on the reservation, and I will say to them, I'm checking in for the weekend, and since I'm going to be here over a Sunday, is there, would you have a recommendation for a church that I can go to? And more people are talking about church less and less, and more and more the person across the counter looks at me like, you expect me to know about churches? And oftentimes, I'll say, so do you know any church in the area? Do you know of anything? And the problem is that the person across the counter kind of represents our communities today. They look at you and say, I don't know any church. And that always gives me that pause to realize that, whoever is listening, if you work in a church, you oftentimes, your life has been given to church. You know everything about your local church. You know all the stuff that's happened. Well, most of the stuff that's happening, and because that's your world. But the problem is that outside of this smaller, usually about 1/3 of your community will have an awareness of church. 2/3 don't have any awareness of church, or they'll kind of know about church, but oftentimes the people they're formulating what they believe church is based upon what they see in media or in movies. And the problem is that they have no concept of what a church has to offer them. And we have to start creating an understanding so that the community will just look up again. And if you're saying too many messages, what it does is you become known for nothing. But if a church can concentrate on a felt need in the community, and really concentrate on that, get all the ministries talking about it and unify under what we call the umbrella brand, then there is a potential that it will leak outside of the church world, and that somebody in the community will actually hear about it.
Yeah, that's good. So you get hired on by these churches to come be a secret shopper for them. From what you told me, you take in all this information about the community. So realistically, you might know more about the community going into it than maybe the church even does at this point. So where do you go in? What are you looking for these churches as you're secret shopping? What are they really asking you to do?
Well, it's interesting because, again, you just nailed it. I think you nail everything that you say. Anyway, but that's like another side.
Stop.
But the interesting thing is that oftentimes I do know more than the average person in the church. Even talking to people in the community, they're not really aware of this, the demographics. Why? It's because we tend to think everyone's like us. It's that whole idea on social media, if you have a liberal view, then the algorithm works towards you, that you believe that everybody has a liberal view too. If you have a conservative view, you think everyone else has a conservative view. And so people in a community, when I'm talking to them, they oftentimes say, yeah, our community, the average age is probably about what I am. And it's like, unless, they're probably in their 30s. And as soon as you're in your 30s, yeah, that is really the average age of most communities in America. So, you walk in as a mystery visitor. What I'm trying to do is I've done all the research to know what the community the makeup of the community is. And every church says the same thing. We just want the community to come in and enjoy our room. Well, the problem is that the average person outside of the church is usually younger than the average person inside of the church. So when people from the community go, we just had a child, things are bigger than us, maybe, I kind of grew up in Sunday school, maybe we should get back to church for Sunday school. And then they arrive at your church and they walk through the doors. If they look in the room and it's 60s and they're 30s, they say, this isn't the church for us. Like it's a problem that I think every church has to face, is that the church is aging up and ultimately will age out. And we need to look at the community, and the growth is happening in the younger years. So we have to make sure that our children's ministry programs are great and our student ministry programs are really good. But also we have to remember that those 30-somethings have needs, concerns, and goals. And we have to make sure that we're offering something that quickly allows them to say, wow, that's a solution that I'm looking for based upon my needs or concerns, or you know what, you'll help me get to this goal. Well, I will allow myself to overlook some of the things that make me feel uncomfortable, and I'll pursue these things that you're offering me because that's what I need right now. I don't know whether we talked an awful lot, but I mean, obviously, just looking at me, you know that I read Men's Health magazine from beginning to end. Okay, so I do. But the interesting thing is that there's a financial, an area when oftentimes I'm flipping through and I just like, what will I read? How to get six pack when you're really old, all that stuff. And then there was this one area that was talking about, finances. And I thought I'll just scan down through it. And then it said, the number one thing that you need to do is become debt free. And I'm thinking, yeah, of course. And then it said, no, but seriously, you need to become debt free. And if you struggle with this, then you might want to pursue Financial Peace University by Dave Ramsey. And I'm thinking, oh my word, that's incredible. I flipped to see, I am reading Men's Health magazine, who is typically not talking a lot about the church in a positive light.
Yeah.
And then the most telling thing was the next paragraph said, but be careful, Financial Peace University is oftentimes only offered through churches, but it's worth going to church for. And there it is. That's what we need to do as a church today. We need to get people to say, it's even worth going to church for that. And if you lead with Jesus, they will probably not want to know anything more. But if you lead with a felt need as a solution or a path to a goal, they'll say, tell me more. And we need to get a conversation started with the people that are around us so that at least they'll have the engagement where they'll look up and say, really? Tell me a little bit more, rather than just tell me a little less.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying, in the business world, we would say that we are creating a need, or we're finding what the need is in order to sell a product to the individual, whether they know they need that or not, right? That's what most businesses are doing. So they create this brand, they create this marketing campaign based off of all that. So you did an article not too long ago, I was playing around on your website, that was all about, is branding even scriptural for churches? Why? Because it almost sounds a little slimy, right? Like the church going, hey, we want to gather as many people as we possibly can because, like you said, there's enough out there on churches today, whether that's through podcast or documentaries or whatever, that many people can base their judgment and assessment of churches off of that alone. So now you're talking about branding and marketing for a church. Is it scriptural? And why is it, if it is, why is it so important for the church to do it in the local little C context church?
And it's so funny because I immediately envision a person with a trench coat that comes out and goes, "Do you want to buy a watch?" and that whole slimy sales mentality of sales and marketing. That's just, it has to be wrong. But really, marketing is, hey, we got a product and this market needs it. Marketing is just connecting the dots, allowing the market to say, you know what, I've not considered that, but that's what I need. And good marketing, and yes, there is slimy marketing and clickbaiting and all that stuff, which we don't want that. Like, we want to make sure and I even hate reducing Jesus and the gospel down to a product, but we have the best product that has ever existed. And these people are dying and going to hell, and we need to give them life, and we need to do whatever it takes to get them to understand that. The problem is that if you ask them, what is your greatest need in life? no one in your community is going to say, you know what, if I only had Jesus. And what we oftentimes do as a church, we have this oversaturated Christian gospelese syrupy message of there's hope in Jesus, come and find Jesus. Well, they're going, I don't need Jesus. And the problem is that we have to get over that barrier of I don't need Jesus, so therefore I don't pay attention to any church. Well, what do you need? And there's lots of needs, concerns, and goals. Like when we do a demographic study, we give a breakdown from top to bottom of all the things that the people in a particular, what we call the reach area of the church, what they actually need. And oftentimes the church goes, you know what, we actually have a ministry for that, or we have a small group for that. And those are the things you need to start talking about in your community. But if you talk about too many things that you have, then you'll end up not being known for any of them. So in order for it to break through and get through all of that communication noise and all the marketing noise that's out there, you really need to concentrate on one. So what is based upon Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like what are the big needs that are happening in the community? And then put that overlay with the Venn diagram, the circles merged together of the things that you have to offer and the things that are needed. And the sweet spot is that little bit of overlap. And we've got to figure out in that overlap, how can we say it as quickly as possible that that's what we're all about? And then people say, that's what I need. I mean, it's like in scripture where Jesus walks a great distance away from his disciples. I mean, that could unpack a little bit. And he sits down at Jacob's well, and while he's sitting there, like everyone in that day knew, well, no woman's going to come up and say, so how's it going to the guy? Unless, but there's just not going to be a conversation had. Well, Jesus is sitting there alone. And then it says a woman walks up to him. Well, it just didn't happen in the day where the two of them would ever want to engage. Similar to the way we have a church in the middle of your community and the community just doesn't engage with you at all. So Jesus could have talked to her about anything under the sun. Like he knew everything about her. And what does he lead with? He leads with water. He talks to her about water. As soon as, she's there for water. So he says water and she goes, huh? Well, that's all we need to do as a church today. We need to be able to say something that they're looking for and just have them go, huh? And then in that brief moment of engagement, how do we then take them to the next step? The next, so what? And Jesus, just as a masterful communicator, I would like to say masterful branding person, he then moves on to, so what if I could give you water that you never thirst again? And she's thinking, and I wouldn't have to traipse back and forth from where I live to here, like, Master, tell me more. Well, like that's the sweet spot that we need to pursue in our communities, where they're just saying, okay, yes, that's interesting. And this is going to sound really unscriptural, but the earlier you introduce Jesus into the conversation, the more you'll shut the conversation down. Instead, Jesus said that we're to be known for love when, in John 13:35, when he was talking to his disciples and the disciples are like, so Master, what should we be known for? That's like that's a Mark MacDonald version, but right. Similar. So what should we be known for? And he said, well, they will know you're my disciples for your love one towards another. And that's what I've learned when I talk to somebody who is not a church-going person, If I want to talk about church, they don't want to talk. If I want to talk about them, they go, oh, really? You want to talk about that? And if I talk about needs, concerns, and goals or solutions to those needs and just banter back and forth with them, weirdly enough, they think, man, he's interested in me. He must love me. Like in that weird sense of like, why are you paying attention to me? And if we're known for that, the conversation will extend a whole lot farther than if we are known for that overly spiritual message.
Yeah. Is that what you did to me when we first met? You just made it all about me, and that's how this all ended up happening between like our friendship?
Well, and then I gave you the Romans road, you came to the Lord, and then it's like, here you are as a minister of the gospel.
It's good stuff. Let me ask you this question though, because as I'm listening to you talk, like understanding the community's needs is one thing, and I don't want to like. I'm going to ask you a question that's going to feel like I'm trying to talk you out of your own business, like make you like work yourself out of your own job. But I feel like there's a difference between like how the church finds that need within their community, because I feel like what most churches are going to do, and this might be why they continue to hit like a roadblock, is they're asking the church what their needs are, the people who are already there. And those needs within the people, with the people who are inside the church, are different than the needs of the people that are out in the community. Is that what you see first as the first question? And then the follow-up would that be, then how does the church start figuring out what the needs are for the community, that you're walking into these consultations with that information, that the church, that information is readily available for the church? So where is the church missing it? So are the needs different? And how does the church find the real needs?
Yes, the needs are different. There's I didn't bury the lead. There it is. The needs are almost always different. And there's the complexity of it all. So what we end up doing is we do the demographic study, which is just data. I mean, it's survey data that's come back through census and, all of the ways that experts do this, and they get the data to know what the needs, concerns, and goals are. What we like to do with churches is that we like to do focus groups where, based upon the main demographic core that we're looking at, so there's demographic groups, age groups, that we will say to the church, we need to get into a room randomly, 8 to 10 people in those age groups. And then what I like to do is, I go in and I always say, I've never been in this area before. I always act like I'm just totally ignorant of everything. Really never been to your church. If I've done the mystery visit at that point, it's like I've only been to your church one time. Tell me a little bit about this church. And what we like to do is listen for them, what they're saying, and then it's like, so can you even remember when you first chose this church? Do you remember why you chose this church? And that's very telling, because that's when the fourth wall is broken. It's like they went from looking for church, found church. We want to know what that glue is, what opened up the door. And then what we oftentimes hear in each demographic group is that it might be for different reasons, but sometimes it's for similar reasons, that we take and we pull that out and say, that is what these people are looking for in your community based upon the data. So if we can find the overlap, what we go back to is those focus groups are invaluable. We record them, not for the church, but for our team, so that we can go through it and pull out language that they're using. And if we use words that they use as what we call the thread, that one unifying thing that they would say you do really well and the community wants it, then we certainly know that you can build a brand around that thread that you say it, the people in your pews would say, oh yeah, you do it really well. And they probably wrap a little bit of spirituality around it, where the people in the community would just say, yeah, that's really what I'm looking for in life. And the crazy, interesting thing that I found is that if you give a somewhat secular sounding thread, the 3 to 5 words, which is really brand positioning, how do you make yourself different from all the other churches, and then you give that to a congregation, the congregation will be more apt to talk about it than if you gave them a spiritual thing. Because I think that we all talk about felt needs all the time, but it's just tough. I know, in the small groups that I've led, oftentimes I'll say, so do you talk to people about Jesus? And the pushback, what I hear is, oh my goodness, it's like that moment you say something spiritual, it's like, will they accept it? Will I know all the answers? Will I be able to? But if you give them a felt need, like water, like, hey, are you thirsty? It's like, yeah, we'll talk about thirst. But then if you say, well, talk to them about their end times philosophy, like whatever. Like, they just don't want to talk about those things, especially to people that they barely know. So this is a great way for word of mouth, where the church, we know the church grows oftentimes because of word of mouth, not because of anything the pastor says.
Yeah, that's good. All right. Mark, you've given our listeners a whole bunch of great information. We're going to end this episode with a couple of rapid fire questions. You ready?
I don't know. Am I? Yes.
I bet you are.
Okay.
From what I've known about you, I bet you're ready for this. I could probably throw any question at you and you would have a great response. But all right, so the first one is, in your life, what is the best advice someone has ever given you?
Wow. Okay, no, I'm not ready for this. So I think
be known for something, right?
It was beknownforsomething.com. No, I think that probably I keep going back to, and this is going to be like an overly spiritual thing, but I remember in high school, I went to a Christian school. We had a visiting pastor who came, and he said, I want everyone to take out a pen right now. I want you to open up the Bible, and I want you, do you believe that everything in the Bible is written for you? And like, of course. And then he said, if you believe it, are you willing to follow it? And like, we went, yes. And then he's like, so on the inside page, underneath where it says Holy Bible, I want you to write, Lord, I'm willing, ... And that changed my life. I had already come to the Lord. But I think that opened up that whole realm of being a Christ follower. What does that mean? It means whatever Jesus takes you through. And I mean, it really has changed my life.
That's good. I love it. I might follow up on that myself right after we're done with this. That's good. All right. So you mentioned that you're originally from Canada, now a 2-year American citizen. So if you had to if you were in a fist fight with Ryan Reynolds, who is a great Canadian treasure, how would you win that fight?
Wow. I would threaten him to take away his Tim Horton donuts. And then he would break down in tears, and then I'd kick him in the face. Ryan Reynolds. Wow. So we were born on the same day.
Wow.
We were both Canadian. Same day of the year, but not same date. Just so everyone knows, I think I'm old enough to be his dad. But great guy, and weirdly enough, people say, oh yeah, he kind of looks like Ryan Reynolds. So I get that, but I think it's just it's just our Canadian way.
That's so funny, because when you and I left Nashville, I was like, man, this dude reminds me so much of Ryan Reynolds. It's not even funny. And that's the reason why I asked that question.
Yes. And I think I mean, pray for Ryan Reynolds. I mean, he needs to know the Lord, and if there's every so often, I will just reach out to him and comment on something. Someday, someone will say, you could be his dad, and he's going to reach out to me, and I'm going to tell him about Jesus.
There you go. I love it. All right. All that being said, I appreciate you answering those two questions. One that's, very deep and personal to you, and then just a completely random off the wall question. Mark, if people want to get a hold of you, how do they get a hold of you?
Probably. So I'm on social media. Mark Mac 1023. My birthday's 1023. Ryan Reynolds' birthday's 1023. So if you've forgotten, you can look up on Wikipedia and find out when Ryan Reynolds' birthday is. So then just add it to Mark Mac 1023. But if they go to beknownforsomething.com/subscribe. I'm writing articles almost every week for a bunch of publications across the country, and I would love to send every person who's listening, for free. Every week, we will just send you a snippet of the article, and then you can click through to it. But the interesting thing is we have this mantra: say their name, speak their pain, solutions to proclaim. It's this little jingle that we've done, and we put a graphic together of that. And when you sign up, if you under conference, just choose podcast, we'll send you that graphic. But we'll also send you the 5 ways that every website for your church pages on your website can be improved so that you make Google your biggest evangelist. They're really, really practical 5 tips for SEO, and we'll send that to you as well.
That's awesome. Mark, thank you so much for coming on to the Stew on this podcast. Again, I'm so glad that God made our paths cross, bro.
Amen.